balls and second balls and second sec. Balls and second balls.
Is that the Itchy and Scratchy song?
Yeah.
Welcome to Movie Pain or Pleasure Podcast, the show that believes sometimes dead is better. Dead as in sometimes you shouldn't make sequels to things.
Especially A Christmas Story. Because there are 3 of them. And none of them are terrific. One's okay.
So we watched the much anticipated A Christmas Story Christmas, starring Peter Billingsley, who was Ralphie in the original Christmas Story. And we knew from the trailer that we were going to hate it.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, it has a lot of big shoes to fill. And that's really hard to do. I'm trying to be nice here. But I could just tell that it was going to be sappy.
I feel like that's the first issue.
I wrote down my first note is sappy AF. I think one of the main problems with this movie is that it doesn't get the right mix of heartwarming and dark humor that the original has.
Yeah. I mean, okay, them having big shoes to fill is the first problem. They feel like there's this big thing that they gotta match up to. And it was kind of like a small, silly story. Like, it's meant to be like a...
There's a slice of life for one little family.
Originally, it wasn't made to be like this big commercial success, like shoe-in, like this is gonna be the Christmas movie of the era or whatever. It ended up being that.
A cult classic. I remember my grandma had taped it and made me watch it, and I thought it was the funniest thing. And my favorite part in the original Christmas Story is where he's doing the Annie decoder ring, and it says, "Be sure to drink your Ovaltine." It's that moment. The timing is perfect. Ovaltine? A crummy commercial? Son of a bitch. I die every time Peter Billingsley does that.
Yeah, so, okay. Set up. Ralphie's all grown up. He has a family. His wife is 20 years younger than him for some reason. Of course. Because in
fucking Hollywood.
Anything that's supposed to be comedic, the dude has to be with a chick who's at like 25 to 32 every single time, no matter how old he is. And anyway, it's about to be Christmas. He's a writer now?
Or he's trying to be,
which I sort of can get because, you know, he had this imagination for big, tall tales and shit. So, okay, cool. But he's like, if L. Ron Hubbard never broke up his books into little bite-sized readable things, he's like, I'm gonna write 2,000 pages of book. I'm like, nobody writes that, you stupid son of a bitch.
So he's writing the great science fiction novel.
Yeah. So, okay. And he gets a call. It's Christmas. They're planning on going to see the grandparents. And we were immediately like, oh, come on. You can't replace the dad. There's no way you can replace him. We knew he was dead.
We knew from the trailer that Julie Haggerty is the mother, which she is a ditz in everything, and I cannot stand her acting.
Everyone writes it for her to act that way, not for the character.
Yeah,
we'll get to
that.
So Ralphie gets a call. Dad's gone. Dad's dead. Like a week before Christmas. I was like, okay, yes. Like, not like I want his dad dead. We all want him to be alive, but you weren't going to be able to get somebody to play that part. So, good. They're not going to be disrespectful. But then they fuck it up by making the entire movie Ralphie trying to, like, live up to Dad's standard of the amazing Christmas guy dad, which I don't think he ever was. Like he was a loving dad that, like... But he was a 50s dad. He screamed about shit all the time. He went to work. He fucking hated his neighbors. And he would come in, sit down, and not say a damn thing. Expect his wife to, like, take care of the kids. All that shit. Like, and that was his father. But in this movie, they act like he was
this
Ned
great
Flanders
man.
or something.
Yeah, I mean, we always kind of sanctify the dead. So... It takes place, I think, in the 70s, and I'm kind of torn on the depiction. I like that they didn't overdo it and fetishize it the way things have been with, like, look at how things were in the 80s. I grew up in the 80s. I remember the 80s. But what I didn't find believable, there was not one person who smoked a cigarette around children in this movie. Not one.
There's that. They also... there was way too much money in this. Like, you could tell just by the camera that they used. I want them to use a shitty, like, made for VHS home video type shit quality. Like, make it look kind of grungy, like the original one. Like, the original one didn't look like it had a ton of money behind it. So, give me that.
Yeah, there is something in the movie that we really want to know. His radiator overheats, and so he does something that he calls a Midwest souffle because he's going from Chicago to Indiana, and he takes an egg and cracks it inside, I guess, the radiator or something, and it cools it down. And so we live in Texas, and sometimes it gets very cold here, and we have no idea what to do. But never to the point that it's a regular thing that your car's either overheating or you have to deal with long periods of cold. So let us know. Is that like a hack in cold states that you stick an egg in the radiator?
And if it's not, what are they? What are your hacks? I've heard of people like...
I've heard you put water in there.
I've heard of people pissing in the radiator whenever they, they're on the road and they ran out of water and things like that, but... Not an egg.
Not an egg.
So they give moments like that happen where they give little nods to the original storyline a little bit, like his thing is his radiator, but he doesn't.
And his dad's thing was the furnace.
He doesn't act the way his father did, which you don't want him exactly like that, but. If you're gonna make a little callback to it, like, what's his war with the radiator or whatever?
Yeah.
It's not like a war, it's just this thing he does sometimes.
Yeah, Ralphie is very mild-mannered, which, I mean, we don't necessarily want to be like our boomer parents who were... Boomer parents, that's all I'm gonna say. So, you try to be a different kind of parent, maybe, than your parents, or it's some generations have certain ways of doing things. Like his dad screamed about everything. I don't think that's a healthy way of living. So Ralphie is very mild mannered, almost to the extreme opposite, which may have been his childhood trauma of his father screaming at him all the time.
Like, okay, if Bill Burr had been involved in writing this, he would be the perfect guy to be in this writing room, because I think he would understand having that dad that screamed about shit, took care of everything, but, he was probably sentimental in his own way, even though he kind of fucked with you. And Bill Burr, at this point in his life, seems to be very aware of himself and everything, and I think writing Ralphie somewhere between those two would have been great.
Like, he needed just a touch of Archie Bunker in him.
Yeah.
Just a touch.
Little...
Not the racism, but just a touch.
So, I needed that. I think it would have been a great thing. So he has two kids in this movie that are not characters at all.
No, they just exist.
They're barely in there. A Christmas Story followed Ralphie because he was the kid. Because he could have these big, grand ideas in his head that didn't make sense with reality. When it's just Ralphie as an adult, it's not entertaining.
They did have some fun fantasies. That really the funniest one happens at the end where he thinks he's going to go to jail. And, like, his son turns into a British punk and his daughter's pregnant, and it's pretty funny.
And she's got one glass eye that's sticking off in the artery.
Because he throws a snowball and hits her in the eye.
So things like that, things that are edgy. Was
funny.
When they're edgy, it's okay. But the whole movie felt like goofy cartoons.
Please.
Not as good. Not as good.
Goofy was a better dad than Ralphie.
But as vignettes,
Yes, it did feel like, you said it felt like a series of shorts or vignettes that were strung together. So Ralphie really puts this pressure on himself to make Christmas the best Christmas ever. Meanwhile, he's supposed to be writing his father's obituary. It's like they kind of forget throughout the movie that, like, oh, shouldn't we be planning a funeral and an obituary?
They don't ever really plan an actual funeral.
And we thought maybe they cremated him and they were doing a memorial or whatever. So anyway, Ralphie is just like, okay, Ralphie has to save Christmas, and he's this good, wholesome guy. They do bring back his friends Flick and Schwartz. Flick owns a bar, and so those moments are pretty funny. And the guy who was once the quarterback is kind of this bald, scary-looking loser. So the parts in the bar were funny.
Because they had some edge to them. Like, they had the weird thing where his thought, his romanticization...
Romanticization?
Yes, romanticization about the phone call at the bar. This is a 70s moment that I get. Like, okay, that's a good thing to throw in there. The phone call at the bar is my husband down at the bar, whatever, that the wives are calling, and they're all like... And the bartender picks up the phone. Yeah, it's a tavern. Who's this? And they're like, is Robert there? And Robert's not there. And okay, we saved him. Moments like that were cool, but they're so far between.
Yeah, one of the funniest parts that I laughed pretty hard at was the mom hates carolers that come to the door, and she starts freaking out. It's like when Jehovah's Witnesses come, she's like, shh, hide. And the wife is like, oh, they're nice and everything. And the mom goes so far as Ralphie's mom to trip her daughter-in-law so she wouldn't answer the door. So because otherwise her character is so sweet, and that is Julie Haggerty. So she's so sappy.
She's not this character. The mom in the original was so cool because she kind of like, she was kind of like the dad. She was like a little bit of a hard-ass 70s mom, but also she's sort of
1940s mom.
Yeah. Sorry, I keep forgetting which decades I'm talking about. The 40s mom, where she sort of gets her kids' weird vibes, but she's like,
she lived through the depression.
She also
has other
protects
things to worry
them
about.
from their father. Like, she knows dad's gonna be over the top sometimes, so she like puts barriers between them when she needs to. She was a cool mom. She didn't take any shit, but she was like, she understood her kids. She gives her fucking kids cookies underneath the cupboard.
When Ralphie's hiding under the sink,
He's doing that thing where he hides underneath the sink. Okay, here's your milk. And closes it on him and just leaves them under there.
With all the chemicals.
There's one moment that summarizes this mother that is entirely incorrect. So, Ralphie has the dad moment where the car breaks down at the side of the road. And instead of having, the quintessential scene of changing the tire and, oh, fudge, meh. They just gotta wait for the radiator to cool off because they ran out of eggs. Okay. So the kids and dad are having a snowball fight. Whatever. Alright. Still working with it. Cool. Mom getting involved. And grandma is like screaming at Ralphie to get them. Like, the mom from the original would be screaming at her grandkids to fuck their dad up.
Oh, yeah.
Fuck him up! It'd be like, get Ralphie! Hit him in the face! Like, that's what a grandmother with that sort of edge to her would really do. This woman is just she's annoying as fuck.
She's just a diss.
The only good scene is the caroler scene, because she's like, get out of here, I'll protect you. And
go save yourself.
She stands in the window so they'll notice her, and they start singing to her. Like, that shit was cool. That was good.
They have some like kind of missed opportunities. Like, they go to the department store with the Santa, and the girl has a little moment with him, but it's still, like, okay. And so then here's the big dilemma, is that they have to take the girl to the ER because Ralphie hits her accidentally in the eye with a snowball, and their trunk is open, and so all their presents get stolen. So now, and they don't have a lot of money left to spend on gifts, so they try to talk to the kids about that. It's the thought that counts. And there's some funny things with the kids going on, like they make friends with one of the Bumpus's grandchildren. There's the hillbillies with the dogs next door.
Yeah.
And then also these kids, who we find out later are Scott Farkus's kids, are riding around on a snowmobile and tormenting them, like knocking their snowmen over. And there's a good moment where they get them in the end, where they put wood in the snowman and they wreck their snowmobile. So now they're like, oh, we're trying to teach our kids that it's the thought that counts, things like that. And it's just all these little vignettes. There's even kind of a fun moment where Ralphie takes his son to Flick's bar. And Flick teaches him, he's like, come on back behind the bar, I'll let you play bartender. Which, I love it, 70s. Would have been better if they'd all been smoking. So he makes a little money, and I'm like, oh, what if they did this as a way to make back their Christmas money or something? No, they don't do anything with that. There's something where Flick says, I triple dog dare you to Schwartz, and he goes off this ramp, and all the drunks are on the sleds, and that's kind of funny.
Like, but it's also very schlocky. Like, if we just throw it in there, that's all we have to do.
Yeah.
We just have to do something that's similar, and we don't have to put a lot of thought into it.
Yeah, that's how this felt. There's not a good through story. Like, okay, here's one. In the original one, Ralphie wanted this Red Ryder BB gun. That was his obsession. Everybody told him, no, you can't have that. They missed an opportunity. The son said, I want a Flex Flyer sled. And, you don't want to say, oh, you'll put your eye out or something. But his mom could have said something like, oh, you're going to break your arm. Which he does break his arm later. But there wasn't that moment of, I'm just coveting this Christmas toy and my parents, the grown-ups, won't let me have it. It wasn't like a kids versus grown-ups type of thing.
Because from the beginning, they fucked up by making Ralphie the main character.
Well, you said something. You could have had internal monologue for both.
Yeah. Okay, I think what would have been good is if the kids were the main characters and Ralphie was just there. Like, if you watch the original, the dad is one of the best characters, but he's not the main character. Mm-hmm. He's never the main character, but you love watching him. And Ralphie could fill that role now. And the kids could be the main characters, so one, I actually give a fuck about them. And two, I think it would be funny if they had their inner monologue battling their dad's inner monologue, kind of like Inside Out. Like, they don't have to work together, but, like, if they kept bouncing back and forth and you keep hearing what's in their head.
And the kids having the fantasies like Ralphie does. So there's kind of a decent moment at the end where the star on the Christmas tree breaks and the little girl's upset because Ralphie had told her, well, Santa can come if there's a star. So he breaks into Flick's tavern to steal the star on the Christmas tree, which is like a beer sign or something. And a cop holds him up. It's Scott Farkas, the bully. And so Scott is kind of acting, he's acting kind of sinister. And he puts Ralphie in the car and he starts driving him somewhere. And Ralphie is just having all these things like, oh no, my family's going to leave me and everything. And Scott talks to him a little bit about back in the old days. And turns out Scott just drives him home. Yeah. And he kind of says, when you beat the crap out of me, that made me rethink my life. So I owe you one.
I just realized.
Sometimes the bully becomes a cop in a small town, and that could either be a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah. I just realized. The guy who plays Scott Farkas, if they make any more Nightmare on Elm Street movies, he should play Freddy.
Yes, because he's kind of got the nose and the eyes shape like Robert
He was
Englund.
in one of those movies.
Oh, he was?
Yeah, the first time I saw him since he was Scott Farkas was in a Freddy movie. But he would be a good Freddy. Anyway.
He would. Okay, and so then it's Christmas Eve, and here's the moment of the movie that makes me the angriest. So they wake up, and I don't think the parents have even tried to buy, like, they had $20 left. I thought you could have gotten something.
Yeah.
It's the 70s thing. Inflation was bad at some points in the 70s, so maybe it's the same problems as today. But they wake up, and there are all these wrapped presents under the tree. And their dad had bought presents before and wrapped it, and I cried! This dumb movie. I was like sitting there like, don't say anything. Like, damn it, movie. And I had to wipe tears out of my eyes and everything. It's heartwarming. Damn it.
I would have cared
I was so mad.
If I didn't hate everybody.
This was also, we were watching Encanto. And I cried over this one part about the grandmother thinking back to when her husband died. And I hated the grandmother. I thought she was a bitch. And I cried. And so I cried at the end of this movie. I thought that was a really good touch, though. Oh, you got me. Because made me think about the dad, and he still loved his family, and he was sad, and he made all this effort to wrap presents, and his mother had found them in the basement because the fuse had gone out. So she's there's a little moment she said, I have to learn how to do these things myself, and I'm like, sad. And so she had put the presents under the tree. So they had a happy Christmas after all.
That felt more like the mom from the original.
Yeah.
Like, nah, I'm gonna do it myself because she's hard-headed.
Well, and also, like, she would probably like, okay, I'm a widow, I've got to get on with my life. And then the ending is Ralphie had written a story called My Old Man, and he'd gotten very frustrated. He got rejected on a science fiction novel, thought he could never make it as a writer. And so, unbeknownst to him, his wife had turned that in because the paper needed an obituary, and so they published it on the front page.
Yeah, and now...
And all the neighbors congratulate him, and...
Hey, do you have any more stories? And he... It's weird, like, the scene doesn't make any sense until he says, like, well, they asked me if I had any more stories, even though what he was saying on the phone didn't make sense. He never said yes.
Wow.
I'll get to you, whatever.
Phone conversations in movies never make sense.
He's just like, yay, I'm a writer now, I guess... now I don't have to go back to work or something.
I'm here from the future to tell you that the newspapers don't fare too well in the coming decades.
Okay, so he's like, what do you call it? Like an editorial writer?
They do say they're going to syndicate his story. So it's like something like Dear Abby where it appears in newspapers across the country. So maybe he can make some money off that being a syndicated writer.
Whatever. He gets to write one of those, like, not super factual
kind of like
type of things.
Who was the Garrison Keillor, like the Lake Wobegon Days type of guy who was on NPR. stories about his hometown and things like that. And we think, well, maybe that's how it became the book. This was all based on a book called In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash by Gene Shepard, who was the narrator, I think, in the original movie, which he was fantastic.
That's another huge problem. I almost forgot to mention it. I hate Ralphie being the actual narrator. I hated it. His voice is awful for what you want there, and it's not fun. It's weird. Like, he doesn't. I know that they don't sound the same. I know that they can't get the original guy. But get somebody that can match that same sort of feeling. They don't have to have the same voice. Like, the narrator doesn't actually have to sound like Ralphie. Like, How I Met Your Mother was on for years, and the main character of How I Met Your Mother, there's no way he was gonna grow up into Bob Saget. But Bob Saget was the narrator.
Daniel Stern was the narrator for the Wonder Years, and they do switch to the end where they show a clip from the original movie, and I hear this sense of kind of almost panicky urgency in Gene Shepard's voice, and it's funny. And Peter Billingsley doesn't quite have that.
No,
I mean, I know
his is just more whiny.
He is kind of whiny.
Like, sorry, bro, but I don't.
So, yeah, they did bring back my favorite line. So when they notice that the Christmas presents are gone, Ralphie and his mother and his wife are standing there looking in the car, and he goes, "Son of a bitch." So they did bring back my favorite line from the original.
This, we knew we weren't going to like it. It was a hate watch. This is a big old missed opportunity. And I hope they stop trying to make sequels to this fucking movie. I'm going to recommend A Summer Story, which I think came out in the 90s. And it was a pretty decent spiritual sequel. Like, it is a sequel, but it's like, and it's not like we're gonna recreate the Christmas it's a summer story. It's a new thing. It's about a new bully that with a new weird thing that Ralphie gets interested in, and there's a new guy playing the dad. He was in Beethoven. Anyway, good casting choices. The teacher comes back.
Is it Peter Billingsley?
Is it?
I'm asking
you. I think.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Anyway, so the mom has a really fun storyline where she gets into sort of like some MLM Tupperware stuff. It's fun. It's like it gives each character its own thing. There's a father and son story again, but this time it's about going fishing, and they have like
Goofy and Max.
Yeah, like, and it's like the whole summer they're not quite getting what they want. They're not catching all the crappie that they're trying to catch, and then they succeed in the end, and his dad teaches him some wisdom. It's good. It's it's because it continued. It didn't try to force a recreation.
Oh, and I forgot this, not even worth mentioning really. They do bring back Randy, but barely.
Yeah, and
he's just a rich asshole who travels the world.
They really insult Randy. Like, not like anybody really loves Randy.
But
he's just
Randy was hilarious.
He's written as the little kid brother that you expect. It makes sense. Mm-hmm. But in this, he's a fucking asshole. He doesn't even think about coming home for his dead dad. He's like, "Oh yeah, that sucks. How's mom doing?" And even when Ralphie's like, "Oh, well, she got up out of bed
yeah,
today,"
Ralphie had to trick him, basically be like, "Mom's on her deathbed,"
like,
and so
I kind of get it. Like, that makes sense. But also, Ralphie should be fucking tearing his brother up over the phone. Like, "You piece of shit asshole, our fucking dad is dead. What the fuck are you doing?" And he's just like, "I'm in India. It's pretty cool. It's not cold, so that's good."
Yeah. Randy was very forgettable. I enjoyed the addition of Flick and Schwartz. I'm glad they brought them back. But other than that, this was okay. Is it worth watching? Maybe, just so you can better appreciate the original. Now I'm in the mood to watch the original.
Yeah.
I'm in the mood to watch some good Christmas movies. So this is kind of like, you eat your vegetables so you can have dessert if there's vegetables you don't like.
Sometimes you need bad movies.
Sometimes you need bad movies to help you appreciate the good ones. Like, sometimes I've read, in my journey of learning how to be a writer and all of that, I have read bad books on purpose just to see what bad writing looks like. So if you're a filmmaker, if you're a writer, maybe watch this to see what a not-so-great sequel looks like, or a not-so-great reimagining.
Yeah, so watch A Summer Story, I guess.
Yeah, watch A Summer Story. I'm going to recommend once again, which I did for Never Back Down Revolt, Annie, one of the best Christmas movies ever, and also a throwback to Little Orphan Annie radio show in the original Christmas Story. So if you want to join our cult and be my victim and be in the cult of Annie, which everything goes back to Annie, you can watch us on YouTube, Discord, Twitch, listen to us on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, and you can follow us on Instagram at Movie, Pain, or Pleasure Podcast.
Go make a snowman if you can. This is Texas, so probably not. Make a sandman.
Make a Sandman. You'll shoot your eye